Hi, my name is Ryan Collins, and I'm the designer of Siege Command. I want to take a quick opportunity to show you around and give you an overview of the game. So, Siege Command is a two-player lane-based strategy game where the opponents are battling to destroy one another's walls. This is done by either taking control of and maintaining control of the 4 turrets on the board, one in each of the 4 lanes, and also by sending unit cards down each of the lanes to the other side of the battlefield. So let me show you around a little bit with the components, and then I'll go into more detail of what the phases look like. The first thing to look at is the units. So right here at the start of the game, after everything's been set up, each player has 2 separate hands. One hand of units and their bluff cards, and one hand of their spells. So in the hand of units, we've got 6 randomly selected unit cards, and then 4 bluff cards. The point of the bluff cards is to obscure the player's intention during the planning phase. I'll get into a little more detail about that later. Just to give you an example, let's look at this scout. So on the scout card you see here, the top left is the energy cost, that's the vitality, the number of actions that unit has, and then the siege damage, which is how much damage that unit will do to the other player directly if it makes it all the way across the board. Also want to give a shout out to Rob Nix, the artist. He did all of the artwork for this game and is absolutely incredible. He'll also be doing all the artwork for the comic books, and I'm super excited to have him on board for this. He really helped bring all of this to life. So the next thing to look at is the hand of spell cards. For this, you have a max hand size of 6, and then there are 2 spells that start the game on cooldown. So the spells just have the energy cost on there. They're played during the planning phase, just like units. Again, I'll get into more details about that shortly. We also have a health point tracker, some energy tokens, which is the main currency of the game. We've got some wound tokens right here, 1 and 3, and then armor tokens. Both of the decks in both of the tribes in the base game are symmetrical, and then with the first expansion we'll be introducing 3 new unique tribes to add a lot of asymmetry and strategic depth. So let's talk about gameplay. The first phase in each round is a secret planning phase where players simultaneously play cards face down in front of the battlefield. So for example, I wanted to play this bomber just laid out in front of that lane. I've got a ballista that I want to play here, and then let's say that's all I want to do this round. So I'll place bluff cards here so that the opponent doesn't know whether or not I'm playing anything in those lanes. Once both players have finished doing this, they both announce that, and then we move on to the reveal phase, which is kind of an interstitial phase in between planning and action. So at this point, players flip over all their cards, take a look at what the opponent has, and then remove any bluff cards just to make things a little more easy to look at and understand. Then we take energy tokens and place them on top of the cards just to show that we can pay for these. You look across the board, make sure everything's good, and then when this is done, you throw all of these off. And those are returned back to the general supply. That's the planning phase. Now on to the action phase. I've set up a quick example here. So let's say it's the red player's turn, and they've got a militia unit still on the battlefield from the previous round. So you can see it has 3 actions. So this player is going to resolve the first action, which for militia unit, all they can do is move. So 1 action. Second action, it wants to move onto a space, but it's already occupied by an opponent. So they do combat. This is done simply just by comparing the vitality stat of each of these cards. They're both militia units, so it's 4 versus 4. They simultaneously deal that much damage and can only receive that much damage, so in this case, both of those units are destroyed. Another slight change to that would be if this unit already had some wounds on it. So wounds effectively reduce the total vitality printed on the card. So essentially, this militia unit only has 2 vitality because of these wound tokens. So when they do combat, the red militia will survive. So rewinding a bit, this militia has already taken 1 action. Its second action wants to move onto that turret, however it's occupied. So we resolve combat. In doing so, this militia only takes 2 wounds instead of the 4 that was before, and this one is destroyed. Let's return to the player's discard pile, and now this militia can resolve its remaining action. So its second action is to move on to this turret, and the third action is then to move into the next space. Now, it's resolved all of its actions, so we turn it 90 degrees to show it's exhausted, and because it moved off of a turret, it takes control of it. Turrets are neutralized when you move on to them if you don't control it, so moving on to a hostile turret neutralizes it, and moving off of it takes control of it. To add another little scenario to that, let's say that the brown player actually did control this turret already. If we take away these wound tokens, we're rewinding again. This militia, the red one, wants to move on to this turret, can't because it's occupied, so we resolve combat. They would both die, and because the red militia never moved on to the turret, it remains under the brown player's control. So that's a quick overview of what that looks like. So after the action phase is the turret phase, where any active turrets deal 3 damage directly to the opponent. So in this case, both players would receive 3 damage. On the physical printed game, we're going to have a sliding clip, but for Tabletop Simulator, we're just using a little pawn. So you just move that down 3 spaces, and there you go. The next phase is the refresh phase. During the refresh phase, you reset any cards that are exhausted on the battlefield and set them back up again. You can discard any cards you don't want from your hand anymore before drawing back up to 6. And you do some magic with the spells, I'll explain in just a moment here. And then you gain energy. So the base rate of energy is 6. So you gain 6 energy, and then as your health goes down, you'll gain additional energy at this time. So let me go into spells a little bit here. So spells, you have a separate hand, max hand size of 6, and you can play those during the planning phase just like units. However, they don't get placed in front of a lane like such. You just plop them down here anywhere. Now, just like units, you are going to have to pay for those. However, since they don't take up lanes, you can still theoretically play 4 units and any spells as long as you can pay for them. During the action phase, as you're resolving things, you can choose to resolve any unit on the battlefield, in front of the battlefield, or resolve any spells. Play goes back and forth until everything has been resolved. Whenever you do resolve a spell, it goes over here, face down, shows it's on cooldown. During the refresh phase, you can then take any spells that are available that are no longer on cooldown over here and place them in your hand as spell cards. And once you've decided that you're done with that, then you can flip them back over, any cooldown spells, and make them available for the next round. So that's effectively Siege Command. I'll post another video in the future of some actual gameplay and go into a little bit of the strategy behind some of these units and explain some of their special abilities. But for the time being, I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to you signing up for the email list, following us on Facebook, on Instagram, and checking out the Kickstarter whenever we launch a little bit later this year. Thanks a lot. Bye.